Thank you so much for joining us this evening. I'm so pleased to be here with you tonight for a special discussion of Venero Armanno's novel, The Crying Forest. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land which we're currently on, the Yagara and Turrbal people, as well as the traditional owners of the land on which all our Zoom audience, hello, are joining us from. I pay my respect to elders past and present. Sovereignty has never been ceded. It always was and always will be Aboriginal land. Just some housekeeping for tonight. If you do need the bathrooms, they're inside and upstairs. The bar will be open throughout the event and after the event, so feel free to grab one and mill around to the end. If you do post on social media tonight, be sure to tag Adelina, Trent and Benny. And then at about 7:15, we'll move to a Q&A, so please hold your questions until then. And the Zoom hosts, they will post a link in the chat box where all of our Zoom audiences can go buy the book. That will also show you how to use the chat function where you can send through your questions from home. And then at the end, you'll be able, if you haven't already, you'll be able to purchase copies of The Crying Forest inside. And we'll also have Benny signing copies afterwards, so make sure you stick around and say hi. In conversation with Benny tonight, we have the wonderful Trent Dalton. His debut novel, Boys Swallows Universe, published by HarperCollins in 2018, was a much-loved national bestseller and multi-award winner. His second novel, All Our Shivering Skies, was published in October 2020. Please join me in welcoming Benny and Trent.
Thank you so much, Diana, and a brilliantly well-organised event tonight. Thanks for doing all the hard yards to make it work. Hey, you guys at home, you can see some of the names: Wendy, Toto, Lara, Emily, and Al. Thank you so much for watching, you guys, and to everyone in this amazing audience. It's like a Tuesday night. You could be watching what's like The Block or something might be on, I don't know. But you're here supporting a Big Brother, some nonsense. But you guys are here supporting another Brisbane writer, and that, I believe, is an act of activism. You are actively saying, I believe in something important in this world, and I believe in literature, and I believe in Venero Armanno. This is really full circle for me because I'm going to take you back to like 1999.
Okay, hang on. Just relax.
Okay. Settle in. And I'm at creative writing class at QUT, and this incredible Italian guy comes in. He looks like Antonio Banderas or something. He's Spanish, isn't he? So, but and he turns out to be like the greatest writer in Brisbane. And it was you. And we got a signed Firehead, and I read it, and it kind of changed what I think about Australian writing.
Was that Philip Nielsen's?
Philip Nielsen's class. And so this is a real full circle moment to be talking to a man who inspired me and so many others like me. So I'm kind of here because of you, mate. So yeah, and I mean that like I'd be here tonight, but I'm been asked because you inspired me to write some stuff that makes me someone that they might want to ask. So anyway, what we're here tonight to do is to launch this incredible book, The Crying Forest. I'm going to go into it deeply, but first I just want to say it's this beautiful work of pure imagination, but I feel like it's filled with so many deep human things and so many beautiful parts of your soul, I reckon, Benny, which shines right through this book. But before I get to that, I want to go a little bit, sort of get to know you a bit more. I know everyone here knows you, but can you just tell me firstly, 2021, you had like Rocco however many years ago, that good year. You met Nick however many, great year.
I think it was 1999. What a year. The year I inspired him was the year, no, it was a bit later. It was a little bit later. Sorry, my arithmetic is not so good.
So Rocco is in the house, everyone at home, he actually looks like Benny did in 1999. So yeah. Mate, how's 2021 going for you, just as far as years go?
I was just going to say, this is what you're going to look like. So it all basically turns to shit. So, anyway, sorry.
How's 2021 going for you, and you know, for your writing life and your world as far as years go? This year, 2021.
This year, oh my God!
I just want to get an insight into where you're coming from. Like,
yeah.
What did you do today, for example? What is your life?
You don't want to know what it is.
Oh, really? No. Go there, man.
No, you don't.
Okay, good.
You don't want to know what I did today. And if I look at my wife while I say that, you'll all get the wrong impression. So it's not even that. It's not even that. I wish it was, but it's not even that. 2021, you know, what a question after such a shitful year last year. You know, coming into 2021, the beginning of 2021 was like seeing the American election go to somebody other than 45 and going, my God, it's finally over. Do you know what I mean? It's finally, we can forget about it. And so when 2020 was finished, it was like, thank God, it can only get better from here. Everyone here can actually say whether it has gotten better from here. I had my AstraZeneca shot a week and a half ago.
Oh, well done.
Yeah, and you know, 3 days of feeling like crap, you know, but I'm really glad that I did. I'm really glad that I took it. My sister had it, Leon had it as well. We're all worried about, what are they called, the blood clots?
Yeah, the clots,
You know,
yeah.
I had a bit of indigestion the other night. And I was like, no, seriously, I had a bit of indigestion. And I was like, it's over. Get the ambulance here as soon as it's humanly possible. But to answer your question, I think it had something to do with writing.
Oh, yeah, just your writing year and,
Well,
your life. 2021.
Okay, it's been really, really, really great. You know, I've got my family, I've got you guys, I've got the University of Queensland. You know, in terms of being a writer, even though I don't sell as many books as certain people around here at the moment, it's a really wonderful thing to be able to write, to be able to publish, but also need to have a job. And the job that I've got, and you know, the only people here don't employ me from the University of Queensland, and I don't think they're online, but you know, I've got the best job on the planet for a writer, and kind of one of the best jobs on the planet anyway, because I get to deal with students, and some of my students are here tonight. And,
oh, brilliant.
And they brought their mum, which is even better.
Oh, well done, guys.
Okay,
That's
so
cool.
it's just
welcome.
Yeah, so it's just, everything's cool.
Well, mate,
I'd say everything's cool.
Well, on that, I've watched you do that job, and I saw the same guy I saw in 1999 inspire all of those young Brisbane writers. I thought that was so cool, and you're firing them up.
Trent came to talk to my class, to one of my classes, not last year, the year before.
Yeah.
And after he left, people came up to me and said, I'm in love. And it was non-gender specific, which is great. Everybody said, I'm in love. I'm going to be a writer. What do you do, Vanny? Nothing.
And it was midnight because they just wouldn't shut me up. They just go, man, I'm hungry. All right, Vanny, can I, the second thing I want to know about getting to know you is sort of related to this book, because this book goes into wonderful realms of the supernatural, which I'm really interested to talk to you about. Can I just getting to know you in your family, in the Dalton family, right? Deegan Street, Sandgate, 1980s. My auntie Monica has a famous story about ghostly apparitions. There were wrapped presents. She woke up at like 2 a.m. There were wrapped presents floating at the end of her bed, and it's Dalton family sort of mythology. But your family going back, ever had any sort of those? You know, there's just always ghostly tales in the families, and I'm just sort of wondering about your sort of personal history with the supernatural.
Can I just say that you probably are talking about the third novel with that story?
Maybe
You should think about it, because
box
that
that
sounds
away.
really good. Because if you don't use that, I probably would.
Oh man, well actually at a book event then at the Brisbane Writers Festival, I met owners who then went on to inherit that house.
Oh, right.
And they said, you lived with the long ramp at Deegan Street. Did you ever see the ghost? And I'm like, what? Everyone said there was a ghost. So anyway, sorry, tell me. Let's go.
That's good. It's so much more interesting.
Stop it. This is...
So I'm used to interviewing people. I'm not used to being... Okay, so...
have you had any, like...
No.
Because
no.
I'm interested in your love of this stuff. And yeah, is there a sort of, any of those sort of tales from your... Okay, so with the Italian background, there is no specific ghost story in the family. It's just that my mother in particular used to believe in Giovanni, in Sicily we call them i spiriti. Okay, so is that what how would you say it in Italian, in proper Italian? Spirits. Yeah.
Oh, cool. I spiriti, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, so my mother believed in the spirits, and she used to say that she always prayed to God, Jesus, the Virgin Mary, and the spirits around us so that they would look after me and my sister, so that we wouldn't come to any harm. And when my mother first realized, when she first knew that I wanted to be a writer, she started praying to the spirits to help me get published. And I remember once, hidden away in her room, I saw her, I saw that she'd written out this thing in Sicilian, praying to the spirits for my son to be published. Do you know what I mean? And hey, it worked. You know, if you are unpublished, I've just told you why. Okay? So talk to your parents. They're not pushing hard enough. But so we always had. So even though there was no kind of real ghost story, there was no moment.
No.
They were all around us. Okay, they were supposedly all around us. But where this book really comes from, where it really, I don't know if you want to talk about this.
Please.
But where this book really comes from is 20 years ago, my wife and I moved into this house on 3 acres of land. The house had been on the market for about 6 months. Anyone in their right mind didn't want to buy it because as soon as they walked in, they went, money pit, right? Broken down, old. It kind of looks like I always describe it like this. It looks to me like the type of country English manor that a rock star would buy and fill with drugs and groupies. That's what the house looks like.
And record like Led Zeppelin 4 or something. Yeah.
Yes. So we bought the house because as soon as we walked in, if there are any spirits there, they went, welcome. Whereas other people walked in and they went. So we had this meeting, this really nice meeting of minds or spirits or whatever. Some tradespeople who come to the house are terrified because the house is actually built to be dark. We're in Queensland, where it's built to be dark, and people get scared there. And my wife and I think pretty much Rocco did have one ghostly experience there. You can ask him about that later.
Oh, wow. Okay, there it is. That's what
but we feel perfectly fine there. If there are ghosts there, they really like our mental, whatever's going on in our brains, they can relate to in a big way. Okay, so it really became a real kind of centre place to thinking, what about if there were ghosts here? And there are old in the library in the State Library, in the John Oxley Library, there are old photographs, and because they're old 1930 black and white photos. There's one photo in particular, and Nick, you'll know that, of one of the owners, a little old lady standing outside one of the windows, and it just looks like a ghost.
Oh, wow.
It just really does look like a ghost. So, look, for a writer, what more do you need? You know, I live in a place that is ghostly, so of course I'm gonna write a ghost.
Ben, I didn't know that. That's incredible. That must have been so inspiring to really to embrace that side of your house. You know, normally that's the thing, we're flicking on the lights and go, forget those silly thoughts. But I would imagine in the writing process, you're going, I might use some of this. I mean, there's scenes in the book where the characters are literally looking into dark corners and seeing things. I mean, I can imagine where some of those things come from.
Yeah, so we do tend to walk around with all the lights out because that's great. You know, what I mean is we're not scared. Okay, we're not scared there. But there were chapters that I wrote where I did start to switch on a lot more lights than I would normally switch on. And you know that feeling when you go up into a dark room or to an upper floor that's dark, and you get that kind of feeling that you got when you were 6 years of age and you went into it. That came back a few times, and that made me think, switch on the lights, which is the main thing. But then I thought, I think you're onto something. If you're scaring yourself, you're doing something okay. My
friend, there are so many scary scenes in this book. And there's a couple I want to bring up. But firstly, mate, can you tell us a bit about what the Crying Forest is? Now, I want to. Before I ask that, it is so, I said to Vanny, I am so impressed with the way I went down. I've got 3 of your books on my shelf now. Candlelight, Firehead. I know someone's, I've lent Volcano to someone, so I normally have 4. But each one of those books is so vastly different. And this is different altogether. Can you tell us about what the Crying Forest is about?
What it's about?
What's it about? What happens in this extraordinary? Well, I know. Well, it's a bit of an epic, isn't it? Really, like it sort of becomes it doesn't sort of. It spirals into an epic.
Yeah, I know.
It's quite amazing. Yeah. Well, that's why it's so hard to do.
Well, Well, it's a good question. I mean, the thing is, books, you know, for those of us here, I'm sure 90% of the people here want to write or are writers in some way. And I think we all know that when you get onto an idea, if it's working, after a while, it stops being hard work for you and the book starts writing itself. And I always say to writers, or I often say, you know, people say, what's the hardest thing about writing? I say, it's getting out of the way of yourself, overthinking what it is that you're doing. Because the story, if it takes off, it's going to tell itself. It's going to go in certain directions. That's the first draft. Okay, you know, and then you've got to work on it and all that. But to answer your question, what is The Crying Forest about? In very simple terms, it is a bit of an epic, but in very simple terms, you know, it's a story about a young girl, a young teenage girl, who starts to discover that she has powers, okay? Witchy type powers. There is an older witch who has lost all her powers, okay? Or is in the process of losing all her powers. And to get power back, she knows that if she can get this young girl and suck all that power out of her, she can bring her very sick, decrepit husband back to life, who is like the most evil person on the planet, but is really, really sick. So he's no use to her. She can develop this new kind of witchcraft world and kind of take over again, okay? Take over in the kind of spirit sphere. In the meantime, she gets help from a dying Brisbane criminal who's actually based on somebody who I researched at the State Library, a guy who in his 60s was very portly, kind of bald. I can picture him. I've seen pictures of him, but my picture of him is completely different. There's this criminal figure who got really, really sick, heart disease, liver problems, kidney disease, and then started to investigate all kinds of manner of supernatural things because doctors weren't working. So I thought, put this criminal figure together with my witch, who's going to give him potions. I can tell you about potions if you want in a little bit. Because there is a witch in my background, I have to tell you that. Okay, so
I knew it.
Okay, so if we can take,
too real, this Agatha.
if we can take this criminal figure, if the witch can get him to work for her by making him better for a little while, then he is the one who is going to go and find this girl. Okay, and the forest is the forest nearby to where we live, where I walk my dog every day.
Really?
Yes. And
Love
walking through the forest one day, I heard this sound. And it sounded like somebody crying. And I thought, why? This is a crying forest. And as happens, come on, writers, when you get a title like that, you must run home immediately and start writing. Because The Crying Forest, that title came to me and I thought, oh my God, I've got a novel. At that time, I didn't know what the novel was, but I knew I had a title. Anyway,
Inspiring hearing this. No, you're not. That's incredible. Having just sort of, you know, dived into this, it's incredible to see where it comes from. What do you do then? Because I would then go to my wife Fiona and go blah 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 blah. Do you do that with Nick?
No, I don't talk to anyone. No.
Keep the genie in the bottle. Don't say a word.
I thought you were going to say the genius. It's like
that too.
No, I find it's much easier and much better for people around me if I just shut up
Yes.
and just quietly go ahead with my work. And then sort of 3 years later, I go to Nick and say, oh, I've got a new book getting published next week. And she'll say, oh, really? What's it called? And I say, oh, it's called The Crying Forest. She'll go, that's nice.
I love that. That's the
Nick
practicality.
made if you haven't seen it, Nick made the video, the book trailer, which I think is really fantastic.
It's brilliant, Nick. Yeah.
Which proves she did read the book.
That's cool. That's cool. All right, let's go through some of these characters and what he's not telling you there. It's this incredible blend of crime fiction, the supernatural. I don't want to lean too much into the supernatural because it's such a story of family and legacies, sins of the past coming back in the present, and it's so deep. Like, so don't be fooled by any of the sort of supernatural stuff, which is so cool anyway. But I love that how you leaned into both of those worlds. Can we talk about some of these characters? Agatha. She is this, she's a witch. If I hope that's not a spoiler. But,
no, she's a witch.
You mentioned it, but you know, she introduces herself in the most chilling way when she looks at this young boy, this kid named Jack, who kind of goes missing. And we find out what happened to him only halfway through the book. And that is the chilling scene that I want to talk to you about. But there's this scene, she just looks at this kid and he can can kind of hear her voice, and it just says, "I'll take you," and you're just like, "I'm in this freaking story." From there, Vinny, where does Agatha come from?
Okay, so I did mention that I did know a witch once. So this is some of the Sicilian family history, which is just hilarious, I have to say. Wasn't so funny at the time, but it is funny in retrospect, okay? So when my parents first came to Australia, my sister and I were born here, okay? So my parents came to Australia, they didn't know each other. They met, I think they knew the families or something, but anyway, they met in Spring Hill and they got married and then had 2 wonderful children. Anyway, when they first arrived, they lived in New Farm. And New Farm in those days of the 50s was really little Sicily, okay? So there was a very strong Sicilian community there. And they had lots of beliefs that they brought over from the old country. And one of the beliefs that they brought over from the old country was that in this country, doctors know nothing. That's true. So
Your family's all laughing. They're like,
well, I think it probably rings true to them.
yeah.
So I broke, 2 things happened. I broke my thumb and I got a really bad crick neck. So when I broke my thumb, I said to my father, I think I broke it at football, rugby league or something at school or something. And I must have been only 6 or 7. And I said to my father, can you take me to the hospital? He went, hospital. I said, well, can you take me to the doctor? Doctor. And before too long, this lady appeared at the door. And it was this little squat lady who had arrived to fix up my thumb. Okay. And so I had no idea who she was, what her qualifications were or whatever. And so she set about setting my thumb for me, pulling and pulling and pulling and pulling. And I was screaming in agony. And my parents are going, oh, this is good. This is good. And she pulled and pulled and pulled. And then she wrapped it up for me and she said, in a week, you'll be fine. Okay. So, okay. So when she left, I said to my mother, or said to my parents, I said, who's that? And they said, oh, that's the local witch. And she knows more about curing people than anybody else, so you'll be fine. My thumb has never been the same. I blame it's actually this thumb on my left hand. I blame my inability to play guitar properly because I can't really put pressure for too long with bark boards. And anyway, so then unfortunately, when I was about 10 or 11, I really hurt my neck badly. And my family know I've had neck and back problems all of my life, almost from the moment that the witch came to fix my neck. So what she did this time was she stood on a chair, because she was very small, she was very short. She stood on a chair, she got me to stand in front of her, like with my back to her, and she put my head in a headlock and lifted me up because she was quite powerful for a squat Sicilian woman in her 70s. And lifted me up so that my feet were off the ground and then shook me around like this to, stretch the spine. Stretch the spine. And that was the start of my neck and back problems. Okay. But she was the local witch. And funnily enough, I never forgot this person. And so she became the model for this incredibly evil character. It only took 55 years to get even with her. Okay, so that's the model for my.
Oh, really good. I get now why she's so flippin' believable. Like, it's like she really is. And what I like about Agatha is that, am I saying her name right? Agatha, sorry. Is that her potions and her concoctions, I want to try some. Just like bloody Mr. H wants to try them. It's were you conscious of that when you're creating someone like Agatha? You do want, because we are in a world that is very familiar to us here in Brisbane, for us in Australia, but you're bringing in concepts that are completely believable because you're drawing on women like that. And, when you're doing a concoction, she does this incredible concoction that this incredibly dangerous man that Benny described, his name's Mr. H. He takes this to kind of solve some of his problems, but also to sort of prolong his life in some ways, because there's such big themes in this book about people hanging on to life and also hanging on to love. But how important was it for you to make those those concoctions that Argotsa makes, kind of believable. I can smell them. I can smell them coming off the page, and I can taste them just as much as Mr. H does.
I've got something for him later.
Yes.
I've got a little jar of something.
Look out, Fiona, when you get it.
Anyway, well, I did look with the witchy potions. What I did remember about the witch that I met when I was a kid. I actually don't know whatever happened to her. She disappeared off the scene. I kind of she died. But anyway,
She became a wolf.
she died in the book. She doesn't. But anyway, what's it saying? The witchcraft potions.
The potions.
Okay, the potions. So I did do a little bit of research, just a little bit of research into witchcraft things because I didn't want to start to come off as some kind of expert on it. I did do a lot of research for the book. I did research witchcraft and lycanthropy in the north of, where's Steve? In the north of Italy on the Austrian border. So I don't know if you know about any of that, but that's where most of the real witchcraft and lycanthropic stories come from the Austrian kind of side of Italy, okay? That witch that I referred to, she used to make love potions and let's see, my mother told me, she said that she made potions to make you fall in love, and she made potions, I think it was, to make you healthy as well. So, but I only got that from my mother telling me that.
It's fantastic. It's so rich. What sort of avenues did you go down for that research? Did you find yourself really getting involved in that kind of witchcraft? And
no,
there was a cult that you researched in
Northern
Italy.
I researched
a bit about that.
Yeah. I researched the cult because the Benandanti are a real cult, and in fact, they don't even refer to themselves as a cult. They're more like a social group, more like a society than a cult. And these Benandanti, okay, so Benandanti, Giovanni, help me. Does Benandanti actually mean anything, Benandanti?
Yeah, it means travelling well or progressing well.
Good, okay, fantastic, because they refer to themselves as good walkers. So that's what I think is the Benandanti. And then there's the bad walkers who are so there's the good witches and the bad witches, okay? So in this kind of mythology, which I researched in the 16th and 17th century, the good witches would help the agrarian area that they lived in to have good crops, okay? But the bad witches would try to destroy the crops. And so the good witches and the bad witches used to have these things called night battles. And so the night battles took place by the witches lying down on their beds in a certain way and astral traveling into the spirit plane, and they would have their battles in the spirit plane.
Excellent.
And if the good ones won, then the crop was good. If the bad ones won, then the crop was bad. What's really fantastic about all of that is that the good walkers had werewolf helpers. Okay, so werewolves would help the good witches. And werewolves in this kind of society weren't seen as evil creatures. They were seen as slightly fucked up men, which I found easy to relate to.
Queensland men after midnight.
Right? Yeah. So it was really, so in terms of research, like you can go down so many rabbit holes when you research. I mean, you can research this for the next 20 years.
Yeah.
There's 10 PhD theses that I've just talked about, which you could do out of the things I just spoke about. So you have to pull back at some stage. But once I understood the idea about the night battles, the good witches, the bad witches, and the werewolves, and putting all that together in Brisbane,
Oh man, this is why it's so rich. This is like it is. That's some of the stuff that I love most of all in the book. How deep you went with that stuff. Paul and Lía. Lía,
Yes.
yeah. That is now Leah's the teenage girl that Benny is describing. Paul's her dad, but there's a very complex backstory to that. I just want to read this character of Paul. I just sort of noted something. This is Venero Armanno killing it. This is him just kicking ass. This guy Paul lost his wife, and he's sort of thinking about her, how much he loved her, and she went through hell. I never prayed a day in my life, Anna, not until you were sick. First, I prayed you'd get better fast, and I prayed your suffering would end faster. After you were gone, I prayed Lía would learn to live without you. Then I prayed I'd never forget you. I haven't, and I won't. He was still in the dark of his room, yes, but without quite realising. And his thoughts so much like prayers, it'd take Paul out of his bed. He was standing at the doors of his balcony, staring out into the moonlit night. The whiskey bottle was in hand. Paul drank neat, one swallow, 3. I just love you the way you write Paul, and I can't help but think there's a bit of you in Paul or whatever. I won't go into that, but there's a lot of love in there, and I feel like Nick's here and Rocco's here, and I feel like this dynamic. Tell me that stuff isn't, when you're writing passages on Paul and Leah, isn't informed by those two beautiful folks just in front of us.
Absolutely, but I had an even better idea just now. So when the film is made, I think I've just cast Paul. Wouldn't he be fantastic as a dad of a girl who really needs her father more than anything? You've got 2 girls.
I do. Well, that's maybe why that spoke to me. Those father-daughter relationships, you really write
You've
really
acted
well.
a bit, haven't you?
No, stop. What are you doing?
Take some acting lessons.
But tell me, like, do you when you go to sit down, I'm really interested from a writer perspective. When you're going to write that Paul and Leah stuff, are you thinking about Rocco and?
Oh, it must be down there somewhere, but
Sorry.
it must be down there. It must be down there somewhere, because all of our experience is down there somewhere. And without trying to joke too much about it, we write from lots and lots of things. And people say they write from anger, they write from hatred, they write from bitterness. Look, at heart, it's all about love. We all write from love. That's where we start from, okay? And then there's other things that stuff up and go along, and go in different directions. But yeah, of course. So all of those experiences, they're going to help. With the girl Leah, do you want to talk about?
Please, yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
She's
the hero of our story. Yeah.
There's just one thing I'll mention about her. Leah is really, really dark to the point of being. Have you got that down there?
No.
Sorry, he was going to his notes. What was funny was when Trent came to speak to my class, I had like 10 pieces of paper with 100 questions for him, and we had an hour. And I asked him one question, and then 45 minutes later, I got to ask him the second question.
I'm sorry.
It's brilliant. It's a great speaker. Anyway, about Leah, one of the things that I really love about, and I was joking with a couple of my Italian friends here tonight, is that I'm a Southern Italian, okay? So we're darker. Okay, we're darker, olive skin, Levantines, black hair and stuff like that. Northern Italians tend to be like Steve, kind of lighter haired, lovely blue eyes if you want to look into his eyes later on. Okay, so, and the Northern Italians tend to call Southern Italians the black men of Italy. Okay, and I take that as one of the greatest compliments anyone can ever say to me, because Africa is about, see, Cape Bon, this cape, is 100 kilometers from Italy. So a lot of our relatives are really, really dark, really, really black. And what I wanted to create for Leah was that she had that part as well. And there's one part of it, because the book is set in the outer western suburbs in the 1970s, which is, if it ain't white now, it was white then. Like, it's really, really, my wife Nick is white. She's not the whitest person there. Do you know what I mean? So I'm probably one of the darkest people in that area. She says at one point in the book, I must be the darkest person in this area. Yeah. And that contributes a lot to who she is as a person, because it's that kind of, that struggling outsider, always a little bit on the outside of the great, middle of the road.
Oh, Vinny, well, what I do have in my notes is this question about struggling outsiders. That's, amazing we're there. And I don't want to be that douchebag who's always drawing it back to the author. And, it's like it has to come from some place. But I love that you went there for Leah on some of that shit that the poor girl goes through, and it's blatant racism. It's shocking stuff. And it reminds me of stuff I read, that really lovely Susan Johnson article she wrote on you in 2016. And you generously sort of told, the readers about some crap that you went through as a kid. And I was horrified, mate, that bit you mentioned where you were freaking spat on. Like,
yeah, that was a good one. That was good.
That
was
good.
good.
You, right?
I went to the most violent, racist school at the time in Brisbane, and it was pretty bad. But it was pretty bad because, look, these things have different levels, so it's a bit hard to explain. But it was a big migrant group. Big group of migrant Sicilian boys at this all-boys school, okay? what kind of differentiated us from the Australian boys was that there were those migrant boys who could play cricket and football and were kind of in that group. And there were the rest of us, like me, who still to this day, I can't explain football to you. I have no concept of cricket whatsoever. I don't even play soccer. You know, that's how bad I am at all this kind of stuff. I do understand tennis a little bit and a few other things. And so the racism came from the Australian boys, but also from the migrant boys who were now more Australian than the Australian boys. And you know, there were migrant boys who would call other boys, you know, blogs and things like that. And you'd be sitting there going,
It's amazing, the layers.
yeah. So there was a lot of that.
Let's talk about Carl, Mr. H, as I call him, Carl Haberman. How do you write such a despicable character? But in this book, things can change. That's the cool thing about it. But let's say the first half, some of the stuff that Carl does, going into that really seedy underworld of his life, and how much did it reflect this joint we're living in right now?
It reflected, like when I wrote a couple of books, Firehead and the Volcano. You know, I'm sure you've done a lot of research as well. So when I wrote those books, I always tell people, you know, like the rabbit hole, the research rabbit hole. You can just go forever, and you find out stuff which is horrifying, but you can't use all of it. There was stuff left over about, you know, the underbelly of Brisbane, especially in the 70s. Like, I'm really fixated on the 1970s because I was a product of the 1970s.
Right.
So using some of that criminal stuff that I researched just came naturally. And once you create a negative criminal character, like I say, the character really writes themselves going forward, because you can't really paper over somebody like that. You can't, you know, go, oh yeah, but you know, they like kittens and little children and stuff like that. You know, if they're bad, they're bad. Yes, they might love their children, but you know, Tony Soprano loves his kids, right? But how many people did Tony Soprano kill in 6 years, or have killed? You know, they're not redeeming features really. They're just kind of filigree around the end. So writing somebody like Carl Haberman, just, you know, I hate to say it, just came really, really naturally. Really naturally.
Yeah. It's terrifying, this town in those years, how many Carl Habermans there were
the
around.
Ruthlessness. Yeah. You know, that's the thing. It's the ruthlessness. And I've spoken to Matt Condon, you know, who's researched, you know, all those wonderful books about the Fitzgerald Inquiry, about, you know, the 60s and the 70s. You know, Matt knows, you know, 1,000 times more than I do about the things that people will do to other people and not even think about it. You know, not even, you know, treating life just so cheaply. And I think it's really important in a novel like this to give it its due. You know, like, I'm not writing a book that's meant to, like I said, just to paper this stuff over. You know, if you're going to write an evil character, then it's got to be, unfortunately, it's got to be evil.
Well, speaking of evil, some of your scenes you're writing about utter terror and scary stuff in this book. I've always felt you write about love like nobody's business. You know, she sold her kisses for caramels. You know, young love in particular, just incredibly well. But I didn't know how well you wrote about really chilling, frightening, supernatural stuff. That scene, how do you approach that middle scene? I don't want to give anything away, but we kind of find out what happened at Jack, and it's kind of the beginning of part 2, which really sort of sets the book off on a whole kind of amazing odyssey of incredible supernatural type stuff, which is really eye-opening. But there's just incredible scenes that could easily have sat in Game of Thrones, that could have just as easily sat in a Stephen King novel. How much joy do you get out of that? And where do you learn to write that stuff? Like, where did Venero Armanno learn to write that stuff? Because you've been writing about Italy and love and incredibly other beautiful things.
Well, we're all readers, aren't we? You know, and we tend not to read just one specific genre, or maybe we do, but you know, we travel through these things. So you know, Stephen King's early novels, Carrie, Salem's Lot, and The Shining. Those were really pivotal novels to me, because I read them when I was 17.
Yeah, right.
So
key reading years.
Exactly. So they tend to stick in your mind. So even though I don't read a lot of horror now, the horror is there somewhere back in the history, but it's specific. Look, to answer your question in a really bad way, it's just specific to the genre. So if you know the genre, or if you feel that you can add something to that particular genre, it tends to come out of you anyway. Like, I never ever intended writing a book or any kind of story that would have anything bad at all ever happening to a child, right? Ever. But this book, you know, that's the story. It's about children. It's about the things that we do to other people, you know, to hurt them. You know, the things that we'll do to hurt other people because we so desperately want something and we don't really care. We don't really care. You're just something for me to use as a, not me, for my characters to use as a stepping stone, like a vampire. A vampire looks at you and goes, "Oh, you're so beautiful," and sucks the life out of you and you're dead, right? But you know, we have people like that. You know, criminality is like that. You know, natural evil is like that.
I was just talking to Steve about children in books and why the stakes are raised. And it's so interesting that you talk about evil. The stakes are raised in the evil stakes as well. Yeah, when you're doing with children. Okay, this is weird. I had a conversation with a woman who talks to animals, right? She found a series of strange circumstances led me talking to this woman. She basically helps you put your dog down, and she lives in Brisbane, and you take your dog and you ask her to talk to the dog and say, "These are my feelings," and then the dog talks back to her and she tells you what the dog's talking about. Right? Each to their own.
The dog whisperer, is it?
Like a dog whisperer, essentially, but literally having conversations with the dog.
Right.
And I just said to her, like, freaking good for you, right?
Yeah.
Good for you. And anyone who goes to you, good for you. What I said to her is a thing where whatever gets you through the night, and whatever gets someone through the night, in the sense of, even if the dog isn't talking back to her, it's bringing some comfort to the person who's just lost the dog.
Absolutely.
Tell me your feelings on the supernatural, but that even goes into faith. You know, like, this is, you know, some of this stuff. You know, and I'm not saying that you're at all sort of, you know, you're just the novelist, but where are you at with faith and that leap that we have to take in the things that have no sense and make no meaning and kind of that are hard to explain?
Wow. So I've got to be going now.
Sorry.
I'm really quite busy. So, that is the, you know, how long have I've been a writer. I think I published my first book in 1991. So I've never been asked something like that, and I'm sweating. So last night, this is a true story. So now I see that this story was actually looking into the future and telling me something about tonight. I dreamt that you and I were here doing this talk, and as we were doing the talk, I realized I didn't have any pants on. This is the truth. This is the truth. And I walked from here over maybe that direction and found a clothesline and a pair of somebody else's baggy trousers and put them on, and came back and sat down, and Trent and I kept talking. So now
That's wonderful.
It's not.
They're smiling at us.
So it is not wonderful, because now I feel exactly the same way, and I don't know where I can go to retrieve this so that I can say something that makes a little bit of sense.
You answered it. It's beautiful. I love it. But no, please, okay, go. Yeah.
Okay, so I wouldn't say, I was brought up a Catholic, but I'm a lapsed Catholic. I don't know if I believe in, you know, God and hell, heaven and hell and things like that, but I do believe that there is a great spirit. I think we're all connected in some way, and this is what makes the bad stuff so sad, is that really deep down, we're all the same. We're all human beings with a soul, something called a soul, something that is some kind of energy. And, you know, I think writers come from that point of view, come from some place which is desperately sorry that we don't connect in the way that we really could connect. And, you know, writing books is a little bit like trying to make some kind of connection with the...
Wow. Yeah. Sorry, just hearing you. No.
But look, that's my answer.
Oh, man, that was so eloquent.
Is it?
I feel like
that's my pair of baggy trousers.
I feel like you walked to a house somewhere in your underpants, thought about it, and came back. And but that's a beautiful answer. That's so true. I feel that. I feel like, why am I not? And I think there's people with deeper sense of stuff than I have that could easily get to the places I get in.
But if there is one writer who understands this. You've read his books, right? You know his books. You know it's Trent. Trent's books are full of that soul connection that I'm talking about, and that's what I think.
Maybe that's why I'm asking that.
I think that's what makes Trent's books so popular. What people can really, really relate to so well.
Thank you so much, but stop doing that now. You've done that like 3 times. Like, but thank you. That's really sweet coming from you. Your head. What are your thoughts on the Venero Armanno imagination? Is that something like from a kid? Was that pretty wild for you? I've read that you kind of felt a bit in the Susan thing again. You felt a bit kind of dumb or not present as a kid or something. I don't, but was your imagination there all the time?
Yeah, my imagination was there all the time. I was the dunce of the class for a long time at the school that I was at, the violent racist school that I was talking about. I was always bottom of the class in every subject, probably because I was just so desperately unhappy at that school. And a funny thing happened. I failed everything so badly that at the end of, that's right, I did do year 11, but I failed grade 11 really, really badly. And my parents said, you have to repeat. And I said, okay, look, if I have to repeat, the one thing I ask is that I don't do it at this school. I have to repeat somewhere else. And so one of the best things they ever did for me was they sent me to Kelvin Grove State High School, which was completely and utterly different. There was no racism, there was no violence, and there was something which I'd only ever kind of twigged in the distance before, and that was the female. And so I loved the school, and people stopped abusing me and actually were friendly to me. In my first term, I got 7s in every subject. I went from E's and F's to their system of getting 7s. And so the teachers just treated me. They stopped treating me like a moron, and they just assumed that I was smart. And so from that moment on, I was kind of smart. Like I wasn't great, but I did well. And my parents kind of would look at me as if aliens had come and taken their child away and replaced him with this other kid. And they didn't care one bit. They were really, really happy. That one, glad is gone.
That's brilliant what you say about the female. It was the female that gave me books by William Burroughs. Girls often give you, but make you a writer.
Yeah, they didn't give me very much, I have to say. They didn't give me a lot, but anyway.
We're about to come to questions, guys, so I hope anyone's got any great questions for Benny, please get thinking. There's one more thing I want to ask you, mate. I feel like this is full circle because there's a book, I wish I had, it's called something like Dark by Night or something.
Darker Than Night.
Darker Than Night. Can you tell me about a book called Darker Than Night, and have you reread it? No. In recent times?
No. Okay, so after I read Salem's Lot, everyone know the early Stephen King book, Salem's Lot. So it was his second published novel. First came Carrie, then came Salem's Lot, then came The Shining, and then after that, I think it was The Stand. Anyway, after I read Salem's Lot, while failing first year law, after just telling me what a genius I was at school, I got into law and was failing. The reason I was failing was because I decided, well, this guy called Stephen King can write a book called Salem's Lot. I can write a book called Darker Than Night about a Sicilian vampire migrant in Brisbane who lives at the University of Queensland, because I was at UQ. His lair was underneath the lakes at the University of Queensland. Cool. And I was doing law and hated it. And so the plot line was my vampire, my migrant, whose name was Marcello Piedemonte. That is a name I've got to use again. He used to come out from his lair at night and kill law students. That was the whole story. Let me just tell you the ending. I can tell you the ending. He's the only vampire in history who gets bored with his life, with his eternal life, and commits suicide. Because I just couldn't think of how to end the book. So I thought, he can just kill himself.
But he's immortal, and does he wake back up in like UQ law class or something?
The sequel.
Eternal damnation.
The sequel is going to go for law professors.
That's fantastic. We're going to take some questions, guys, now. And thanks, Young.
We will start one off from one of our Zoomers at home, actually.
Thank you.
From Janine, she says, do you see the crying forest becoming a part of urban mythology? Will there be more witches lurking behind the bins of New Farm?
Oh, cool.
Thank you. Let's say that if everybody here bought a copy of the book and then told every member of their family to buy a copy of the book, and if it actually, look, if the book sold, if it did well, there's a lot more to it, because Trent very, very nicely said that it was an epic. It kind of is an epic in conception, because kind of halfway through, I just realized there were so many story strands that I really, really wanted to write about. And one of them is that thing that I was talking about the werewolf, because I really want to write a werewolf story that isn't the fangs and fur werewolf story, but the type of werewolf that I researched where it's just men who are really, really stuffed up and do werewolfy type stuff. So look, if the book takes off, then there would probably be more. If not, it's a wonderful standalone.
Okay. You heard it by the book.
That's a really cool idea.
That's the true answer.
Thank you. This would probably require a comment from Trent and an answer from you, Ben. I was listening to ABC Radio recently, and this question, I was a teacher, and I'd like to get to the bottom of it, which is about the influence of teachers on people like yourselves. But on ABC Radio, there was a certain writer who it came to pass that in his year 12 year, he loved one of his teachers, or maybe his counsellor so much, called Wanda, that he told her he loved her, but he was probably drunk that morning anyway. That's Trent, you comment on that, true or false? And Benny, I've heard about the bad school, which I know, but I won't name.
Yeah.
Were there any specific teachers who really just fanned the flame for literary? You know, I can remember a Catholic nun in North Queensland 50 years ago teaching me a Henry Lawson poem. I still remember it. I've still got that picture. Was there any one particular teacher who turned you on?
The Christian Brothers didn't work that way, I have to say. This is how the Christian Brothers worked. In grade 5, the first day of grade 5, so the school started at grade 5, okay? In the first day of grade 5, about halfway through the day, the teacher, Brother, I can't remember his name, got everybody to stand up, and he gave all of us one cut of the strap each for no reason, just to teach us that the strap was there and we had to be good boys, okay? I can picture him. So no, I have to say, look, the honest truth, I really want to say that there was a teacher who really inspired me, but in fact, it was more my friends who read a lot who really did inspire me. I was really, really lucky that I had a group of friends about the same age as me who were really well read, read much, much more than I'd read, and they were the ones who really gave me the encouragement. So it really wasn't the teachers, I'm sorry.
We have another question from Jack at home, and they're asking about your writing process. And I know you said you walked into the forest and you went, bam, crying forest, there's the book. But they said, how do you go about the writing process? Do you start at the beginning or first write a short outline?
No, I start at the beginning. I tend to find, because I do a little bit of script writing, I'll do outlines for screenplays. It's almost like there's a different mechanism in the brain for writing a screenplay, because they have to follow such a distinct sort of Act 1, Act 2, Act 3 path, plot points and things like that. With novels, if I've just got an idea, just something, even if it's like Trent kind of said the first line of one of my books, that book started just with that line. I had no idea what the book was about. That line came into my head. So with The Crying Forest, I think I'd actually started the book before I got the title. I didn't tell the story really truthfully, but I think I'd started the book and then I got the title later on. But for me, I really just say, okay, I'm just going to write. I'm just going to start. And sometimes there's nothing. Sometimes there's nothing. You know, it's like, get a pen, get your hand, get a piece of paper and start writing, because there's nothing's going to appear there if you don't, you know. So I tend to do like a really big first draft, And then I look at it and go, what is this thing? What on earth is this thing? And then you start the process of rewriting. We tend to call the first draft either the negative draft or the zero draft, because it's just got so many things wrong with it, you know, like, so that's not a first draft. The first draft is the zero draft or the negative draft done 3 times. And then you go, I've got a first draft. Now the work starts.
Great. Is there another question from the audience? We do have another one from Zoom. And Wendy asks, have you enjoyed writing this genre more than your other books?
That's a good question. Have I enjoyed it? No. No, because it's so dark, because I have to go through so many dark things. In fact, I keep thinking to myself, the next one has got to be an Armanno. It's got to be full of love and Italians cooking. I've got no idea. Like, I don't know. Like, I feel like I've done that to death anyway. But no, I found it. I did find it quite difficult engaging with that stuff, and it was a constant, sort of like a constant subconscious conversation to say, you have to be true to this. You have to keep doing it this way. You can't, you know, because I kept wanting to let people off, you know, like I wanted the story to just have a really, you know, start getting happy, you know, and people to be happy, but they do in the end, sort of. But, you know, it really, I wouldn't say I suffered for my art. I hate writers saying they suffer for their art, but it was a difficult process. It really,
Staying true to the genre. You're staying true to the genre.
I hope so. It really was.
Absolutely.
There was a question there.
Hi Benny, hi Trent, great to be here. I'm Bianca. I just had a question around coming from someone who's a writer but also Italian-Australian background, and I'm fascinated with this idea of putting Italian folk horror into an Australian setting, but away, I guess, from what you've spoken about the people, the evil that people do, and in a city or a house, sort of a domestic setting. What do you think it is about the Australian landscape that lends itself to a horror story,
Cool
like
question.
Australian Gothic and that sort of thing? I'm just really interested in that.
Well, it's a really good question. I mean, and you know, it's sort of like the landscape is beautiful and terrifying. There's just no two ways of describing the Australian landscape, is there? You know, like everything that you see that is so gorgeous. You know, you have a look at the desert; it's so gorgeous. But you know, how long would you last there without water? You know, you look at, you know, parts of Brisbane which are really, really beautiful, but you know the history that was there. You know what the Indigenous history might have been, or you know the battles that took place there, the blood that's in the soil. Okay, so I just think that if you don't necessarily, I'm not saying like I'm like a, you know, like an earth whisperer or anything like that, but if you have any kind of sensitivity to what's around you, it's sort of like, for me, it's like driving past people's houses and thinking, that's a really nice house. And then at the same time, it's like Paul McCartney and John Lennon, really positive, really negative. You know, you walk past a beautiful house and you go, oh, what a beautiful house. And this little voice goes, in every home a heartache. Do you know what I mean? And so it's like you look at the landscape and you go, in every bit of great beauty, people died trying to cross the mountains. You know, take a look at our mountains. You know, before they found passes and things like that. How many people, you know, died in those amazing journeys? You know, so it's kind of the landscape lends itself to that kind of beauty. But I always think that that kind of beauty is so close to terror that, you know, the line between them is very, very indistinct.
We probably have time for one more question.
Both of you nice to meet you. I find it interesting, Benny, that you said that you were grounded in the Brisbane in the 1970s, because as a young writer, somewhat nurtured by the high school English system, I was told not to write about myself in Australia as a young person. I just wanted your thoughts.
Wow.
Well, that's probably, you know, there's a lot to be said for that, because I remember in my first 10 years of teaching at UQ, almost every first year short story assignment had to do with living in West End, being in a toilet with a needle in their arm. And I remember saying to people, look, we've had enough of the West End. And Avid got into the story somehow. I came into Avid and I was drunk. I stole 3 Murakami novels and then I did some horse. Then I went to, some cafe nearby and I snorted. And it's like, oh, please, God, can I have something else? Can I have something else? So, but we have to write. Sorry, I'm being silly, but it's true. We have to write from what we know. Okay, so I guess in a way, the answer to your question is really this. Even though that first novel and everything that I write about Italy and the 70s and Brisbane and all that, it all sounds great. But what you don't hear is that I had 12 years of writing failed novels before my very first short story was published. So I wrote all those personal stories that were really, really indulgent and everybody read them and went, we don't want this. It was only once I realized that there's a little bit more to writing than just writing about the self. What is the universality that can come out of that particular story? It took me a long time to I wouldn't say I learned it, but it took me a long time to write out of, that kind of very, very personal story that nobody else can really relate to. And the Friar Library at UQ have got all my unpublished manuscripts. They've got, I think it's 10 or 12 full novels, written in Darker Than Night is there. There's the 1980 novel where I copied S. Scott Fitzgerald. There's the 1981 where I copied Hemingway. There's the 1983 where I copied Graham Greene, etc., etc. No, it's true. It's true. Soon they're going to have the novel where I copied Dalton.
Well, they'll have Boy Swallows Universe and All Our Shivering Skies with copy Armanno. So
Okay.
I think that's all we have time for. If you do have more questions, Benny will be inside signing books.
I've got one thing to say.
No,
I
yes,
hate to
no,
interrupt
no.
because I really want to tell you this. And look, I barely know this man. Okay, so it's not like we're in love or anything. It's not a bromance. We don't do anything other than
it's
this.
developing though. We're really I feel like this is really taking it to a new level. I feel like we're at a new level tonight.
Anyway, when Trent's second book was just coming out, he asked me for a really, really big favor, which was minuscule. He asked me to read a draft of it, and if I liked it, to say something about it. So, it's like I get to read Trent's new book before anybody else on the planet or, 20 other people and, maybe give some kind of response. So it was just a wonderful experience to have, right? Okay, so, it was not a favor. It was not a favor. Out of the blue arrives a present from Trent, an album, a vinyl record, which somebody born in from the 1970s who loves The Who. If any of you know who The Who is, the group. So he sent me a gift for doing this favor for him, okay? Which I thought was just an incredible gesture that was really unwarranted. So, I'm Italian. We have to reciprocate.
Get out! What have you done?
So,
What?
when it comes to The Who, they have my favorite album ever, which is called Quadrophenia, which is a double album, and it's got a really big, beautiful black and white picture book inside. And this is a teeny thank you to my bromance.
That is amazing. This is really special. This is my boy Eddie from Pearl Jam. Everything from Pearl Jam starts with this album. And so I knew he liked The Who, and man, I'm really touched by that. I'm really blown away.
I hope you've got a record player.
Thank you. I do. That's massive.
Okay,
Wow.
sorry, I
That's been
interrupted.
amazing.
No, I was just going to wrap up anyway, and thank you both so much for such a compelling chat. You can purchase The Crying Forest inside at the front and then get it signed by Benny on your way out. And then everyone on Zoom, Ewan will send you the link where you can purchase it online. And please put your hands together again. Thank you.
Hey, thank you. Crying Forest. It's an amazing read. Check it out.
Thank you.
That's insane. Beyond that is insane.